Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this afternoon's session on the Global Compact, Creating Sustainable Markets. As you know, the Global Compact was launched 10 years ago here at the World Economic Forum by the then UN Secretary-General Kofi Annan. Under his leadership and that of his successor, it's become perhaps the largest and most influential of initiatives in the now very crowded field of corporate social responsibility, with signatories committing to the 10 principles in the fields of human rights, labour, the environment, and latterly the fight against corruption. We have the opportunity in this session to look back on the lessons and the achievements of the first decade of the Compact, and also to look forward to the next 10 years, from a moment, we must acknowledge, of deep and all-pervading crisis, but a moment when the values of business are uppermost as well in our minds. Now, to do this, we are fortunate to count with a most distinguished panel, who I want to quickly introduce to you. Nearest to me is Mr. Kris Gopalakrishnan, who is the Chief Executive Officer and Managing Director of Infosys Technologies India. In the centre there is Cynthia Carroll, who is Chief Executive of Anglo United Kingdom and Chair of the Governors' Meeting for Mining and Metals this year. And furthest away from me is Mr. Muhtar Kent, who is President and Chief Executive Officer of the Coca-Cola Company USA and co-chair of the Governors' Meeting for Consumer Industries for this year. In addition, we are of course honoured to have with us the United Nations Secretary-General, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, who I am now delighted to offer the floor at this juncture. Mr. Secretary-General.
Thank you, Mr. Ryder, distinguished panelists, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure for me to be here with you in Davos. This is my second visit as Secretary General of the United Nations, and I must say that the mood is somewhat different at this time from the optimistic spirit of the past. I've been calling this the year of multiple crises. Economies are in trouble, trust in business and in markets has eroded. People everywhere worry about their jobs and struggle to survive. Yet amid these difficulties, we face another crisis. It has been building for years and is global in scope. Climate change threatens all our goals for development and social progress. Indeed, it is a true existential threat to the planet. On the other hand, it also presents us with a gilt-edged opportunity. By tackling climate change head-on, we can solve many of our current troubles, including the threat of global recession. Ladies and gentlemen, we stand at a crossroad. It is important that we realize that we have a choice. We have a choice. We can choose short-sighted unilateralism and business as usual. And we can choose, and we can grasp global cooperation and partnership on a scale never before seen. Exactly 10 years ago, my distinguished predecessor, Secretary General Kofi Annan, stood in this hall, exactly where I am standing now. He called on business leaders to initiate a global compact of shared values and principles. He sought to give a human face to the global market. Then, as now, the world faced a crisis in confidence. Yes, globalization had lifted many from poverty. Yet the spread of free markets and capital did not raise all the boats. In fact, it hurt many of the world's poorest people. The Global Compact was our enlightened response. It challenged business to embrace universal principles and to partner with the United Nations on the big issues. Chief among them were the Millennium Development Goals. 10 years on now, the Global Compact stands as the world's largest corporate sustainability initiative. We can boast more than 6,000 business participants in more than 130 countries. The Global Compact has become a byword for corporate responsibility. Its members have moved far beyond mere philanthropy. They have pioneered new standards of best practice in the areas of human rights and labor law. In many countries, they work to protect the environment and fight against corruption. They have undertaken hundreds of projects in health, education, and infrastructure in countries around the world. Now, a new set of crises requires a renewed sense of mission. So today, I urge you to join a new phase of the Global Compact. We might call it the Global Compact 2.0. Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a new era. Its challenges can all be solved by cooperation, and only by cooperation. Our times demand a new definition of leadership, a global leadership. They demand a new constellation of international cooperation. Governments, civil society, and private sector working together for a collective global good. Some might say such a vision is naive, or that it is wishful thinking. Yet we have inspiring examples proving the contrary. Often, businesses have played a critical role. First, think of the Green Revolution in the 1960s that lifted hundreds of millions out of poverty in Asia. Second, think of the global vaccination campaign that eradicated smallpox by 1979. And third, business and government cooperation has reversed the depletion of the ozone layer. And fourthly, but not last, we have seen solid progress in the fight against AIDS, tuberculosis, polio, and malaria. Therefore, so today, we have an opportunity and an obligation to build on these inspiring examples. But we must break the tyranny of short-term thinking in favor of long-term solutions. This will demand a renewed commitment to core principles, a new global compact. In this time of economic crisis, I know there will be a tendency to retreat into nationalism, protectionism, and the other many isms, so-called isms, that promote narrow self-interest over common global objectives. Doing so, I tell you, would be a great mistake, not just for global development objectives, such as giving the poor a fair chance to make a living. It would also compromise national self-interest. That challenges we face today are global in nature. By working together, we can solve them. The Global Compact provides an excellent platform. Let me give you again some examples. The Global Compact Caring for Climate is the world's largest business-led initiative on climate change. Chief executive officers are disclosing their carbon emissions and committing to comprehensive climate policies. They are using renewable energy, investing in energy efficiency, and promoting climate-friendly practices such as virtual meetings. The CEO Water Mandate is advancing water stewardship through strategies such as drip irrigation and water harvesting. New technologies are recycling water used in manufacturing so it can be returned safely to the environment. Wind-powered desalination plants are being built that can produce drinkable water for a city of over 1 million people. In financial markets, the Global Compact, through the Principles for Responsible Investment, has begun working with the major investors so their investment evaluations can incorporate key environmental, social, and governance issues. Ladies and gentlemen, today with the economic downturn and climate change, the stakes for companies have never been higher. But for businesses with a vision, the rewards are equally high. Over the past few months, momentum has grown for what I call a global Green New Deal. Last week saw the inauguration of a new President of the United States. President Barack Obama has made a clear commitment to re-energizing the American economy by boosting the green economy. The green economy is low carbon and energy efficient. It creates jobs. Investment in sustainable technologies will turn today's crisis into tomorrow's sustainable growth. President Obama is not the only political or business leader choosing to follow such a path. I therefore urge all of you, through your supplier chains and via your business partners, to develop good policies and practices in the areas of human rights, the treatment of workers, the environment, and anti-corruption. You can use the Global Compact's accountability framework and disclose your progress annually. By doing so, you will not only be doing what is right, you will also be helping restore trust, confidence, and credibility into the markets. Recent polls show a dramatic erosion of faith in business. 3 of 4 Americans trust business less than they did 1 year ago. Only a third trust business to do the right things, half what it used to be. Among young people, the loss of confidence is especially marked. These figures are mirrored across the world, and the same polls show that globally 66% of the world's people think businesses should be fully engaged in tackling our common problems. Those who disagree total only 3%. Distinguished participants, the writing is right there on the wall. Without trust, we cannot prosper. It is time to get off the fence and take up this agenda seriously. Many of you are cutting costs to deal with the economic downturn, but I think you will agree that it is important to reorient your organizations for the economy of the future. Every downturn is followed by an upturn. If you make the right investment now, you will be laying the foundations to tackle critical long-term issues. You will be in the forefront of a new green economy. I encourage you to help create a future based on a low-carbon economy, green jobs, renewable energy, and energy efficiency. I also ask you to be part of the movement for the comprehensive and meaningful agreement at the Climate Change Summit in Copenhagen at the end of this year. I call on you to make full use of your supply chains to make sure that the cleanest technologies are developed and applied everywhere. And I ask you to lead by example. Educate your consumers, suppliers, and workers. Share your technologies with the poor. It is the one and only path to a sustainable future with the prospect of prosperity for all. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, we have choices to make. Now is the time to rebuild the trust. It is time to restore confidence. We can only do it by offering genuine and long-term solutions to real problems. People need to be confident that we are doing the smart things and the right thing. This means investing in the new economy, the economy of the future. Enlightened self-interest is the essence of corporate responsibility and the key to a better world. Thank you very much for your attention.
I'm sure I speak for us all in thanking the Secretary-General for his speech and also for the challenge and the very clear challenge and calls that he's laid down for us. To respond to that challenge and that call, I want to go straight to our panel, who I've introduced already, for a quick, relatively brief statement of views on the Global Compact, after which we will try to go into an interactive mode and involve you in the hall in the discussion. So without any further delay, Kris, can I ask you to lead off with your thoughts about the lessons of and the future of the Global Compact?
Thank you, and Secretary General, friends. Clearly, this forum is happening in the midst of economic crisis. Probably almost every panel has talked about trust. Every panel has focused on value-based business, principle-based business. Clearly, there is a need to reconnect, rebuild the trust. The Secretary General has passionately talked about rebuilding the trust. The Global Compact framework has been in operation, and it's the largest business-led initiative that is out there. Now, is this a framework that we can take and integrate with what we do well in our businesses? In our businesses, if we are able to quantify something, measure something, and then make that part of the framework which is used to evaluate businesses by the boards, it is used to actually disclose to all the stakeholders about the performance of the company. Here is a framework which is already there, which has been in operation in about 6,000 companies for over the last 10 years. So is there an opportunity here? And I'm really pushing it into a direction where it becomes in some sense part of, let's say, something like the accounting standards and things like that. And deliberately I'm doing this because unless we take this opportunity to seriously look at how do we make this part and parcel of every business. Regulation in some sense will only catch or look at things which are known. Innovation always actually is always ahead of regulation. Everybody knows that actually. And the next challenge which is caused through innovation, etc., may actually tilt the pendulum to the other side, the balance to the other side, and create a catastrophe. So, can we take this opportunity to look at how we can build on this framework, how we can integrate that into a comprehensive set of measures businesses use internally, boards use to evaluate businesses, the society and the stakeholders use to evaluate businesses, and in some sense, becomes the common standard across businesses. Now, there are two parts to this. One is, there is a framework, and then what is inside the framework. I think the first question to answer is, should we look at an extended framework which includes the global compact? And I would say, intuitively, most people would say, especially in this environment, because it's the question of building trust, that is something we should look at. Then we can actually debate, because these are evolving measures, metrics, etc. Accounting standards keep evolving, and businesses have a role. Of course, the regulators also have a role in deciding on these things. And together we can decide what goes into the framework. There is actually a model already existing, and we can take that forward. So my submission would be that yes, we need to take this forward. We need to look at how we can integrate that as part of how businesses are measured, and use this as an opportunity to build for the long term, as the Secretary General said. Use this opportunity to do good for the long term.
Thank you very much indeed, Kris. I'll move straight along to the next panelist. Cynthia, please.
Thank you very much. Secretary General, thank you so much for your insights and your views. I think the progress over the last 10 years as it relates to our industry and the UN Global Compact has been considerable. However, as the Secretary General has observed, public faith and trust in business and markets may certainly take a back step because of the circumstances that we're now facing in this economic downturn. I think he's right that initiatives like the Global Compact can help us to show that we deserve trust and can be treated as a partner in society. And all the more that we embrace our values internally, we reinforce those values and share them as well externally. Amongst the achievements in promoting the 10 principles and the underlying philosophy of the Global Compact have been, first of all, partnerships. 10 years ago, the partnerships between companies and governments, or between companies and NGOs, were almost unheard of. And now it's recognized that each brings distinctive skills. Working together, we can achieve things that we can't do just on our own. And hence, in the extractive sector, we see success of multi-stakeholder partnerships, engagements. The case of the Kimberley process in combating conflict diamonds and protecting the market for diamonds from legitimate diamond producers like Botswana, which is one of Africa's key success stories, or the Extractive Initiative, Industries Transparency Initiative, which is making a significant impact on the management of resource revenues in increasing the accountability of both governments and companies and in reducing opportunities for corruption. It's being adopted by 26 resource-rich countries and does show what can be done when governments, civil societies, and companies work together. In addition, individual companies are forging increasingly productive partnerships with NGOs on a bilateral basis, such as the ones that we have at Anglo American, working with CARE on development issues in Southern Africa, and Brazil with CARE as well, in particularly northern Brazil, on poverty-related issues, and with Fauna and Flora International on biodiversity, and with a myriad of other smaller NGOs on a countrywide basis. Business and development. There's also been a greater appreciation of the central role of business in development, in achieving the Millennium Development Goals and combating poverty. And I'm proud to say that we signed the Millennium Development Goal call to action just recently to play a role, an active role with government. And within Anglo, we're involved in supporting the creation of sustainable small firms. In South Africa alone, for example, we are now supporting companies that generate about 10,000 jobs. And through enterprise development, we have the ambition, through a group called Anglo to be independent in Zulu, to produce or help generate 200 companies on an annual basis. And we're applying this model throughout the world, throughout our system, in places like Peru, in Chile, in Brazil. We're working with governments and other companies through the Investment Climate Facility for Africa to make it easier to get new businesses off the ground in reforming countries like Rwanda, Liberia, and Zambia. And similarly, we see more consumer-facing companies are doing excellent work in creating products and services that meet the needs of the so-called bottom billion at the base of the pyramid of our global society. On the human rights side, we see significant strides, too, in the area of business and human rights. The issues are much better understood than they were not too long ago. And human rights are a matter for all actors in society, and the number of companies with a human rights policy is growing rapidly. In the extractive sector, the voluntary principles on security and human rights have made a palpable difference on how corporate security needs are planned and implemented. At a policy level, 5 years ago, it was virtually guerrilla warfare in talking about the norms on business and human rights. But John Ruggie's work as the UN Secretary General Special Representative has had an enormous impact on putting together, driving consensus about the relative responsibilities of governments and companies based on 3 principles of the government responsibility: to respect human rights, the business responsibility to respect them, and the importance of ensuring that accessible mechanisms are in place to address grievances. All companies with significant impact should be looking at their procedures to ensure that where people believe that their rights have been violated or infringed, mechanisms are available to address those grievances. On the labor front, in relation to labor rights, there's still many, many issues between trafficking, child labor, forced labor. But my experience in these issues is that it is moving in the right direction. Management and labor have largely become much more constructive, much more collaborative in addressing issues. In Anglo-American, for example, our objectives of improving our safety performance and of getting more people involved in our HIV workplace treatment programs are critically dependent upon a trusting relationship between ourselves and the unions. On anti-corruption, 10 years ago, even the compact didn't have an anti-corruption principle. And in many countries, bribes were tax deductible. Hard to believe today. But the climate of opinion has been transformed in the intervening years and helped by the introduction of extraterritorial legislation against bribery in most OECD countries and a focus on both the supply and demand ends of corruption. Business, civil society, and governments are increasingly working together against corruption through initiatives like the EITI. And on the environment, although there's been a lot of activism, a lot of drive, a lot of talk, the environmental area is perhaps a place where we have all lagged. The central issue of climate change continues to dominate, and while businesses are innovating and improving energy efficiency, they're having to do so without a clear and predictable framework for carbon management, and this is a major issue and challenge for all of us. And major carbon abatement projects like the development of clean coal solutions are dependent upon this certainty if the required focus and level of investments are to be delivered. The water, biodiversity, and deforestation agendas are also critically dependent upon success of measures to address climate change. Looking ahead, so what are the circumstances which face us? How do we deal with that? How do we think about the near term versus the long term? Business has, I believe, through institutions like the Global Compact and the Global Reporting Initiative, moved closer to where society expects us to be. Major companies have a huge influence, and more today than ever before, on the lives of those who work for us, those that we touch, the families, indirectly and directly, and whether they people who touch our products or services or directly our operations. And there is clear expectation that we run our core businesses responsibly and in a way that is accountable to our stakeholders. Business has too big an influence on and stake in the societies where we work to stand aloof. We must ensure that as economic pressures crowd in upon us, we don't forget these home truths. Many companies have spent a lot of time and effort seeking to embed sustainable development into our businesses, and have said that we see a clear business case for conducting business in a way that is at ease with stakeholders and mindful of our impact on the planet. Poverty, climate change, and the availability of water are big problems today, and they're not going away. And each of them on the current trends will become more big issues going forward. Thus, although we are clearly going to have to prioritize where we put our resources, we must not see a retreat from the advances made thus far in our businesses moving closer to the objective of sustainable development. And otherwise, when the recovery comes, others in society will once again see business as self-centered, self-serving, and irresponsible. So were that to be the case, we would not be reaping the benefits altogether. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cynthia. I'm going to move straight on to you, Muhtar, please.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary General, it's a great day for me because I had the pleasure to listen to you twice talking about sustainability and the role that and the leadership that you're showing and your commitment and the role that you're playing in strengthening and forging a closer relationship between government, civil society, as well as business, which is needed today more than ever for success. So I thank you for your leadership here tonight. The Coca-Cola business, amongst all international businesses, is probably the most local of all businesses. We produce in 200 countries in the world with 1,000 plants, with 300 bottling partners in 200 countries in the world. And we produce locally, we employ locally, we distribute locally, we support our customers locally. And and we have a simple notion that attracted us to the Global Compact, and that notion was that unless we played, as Coca-Cola, a meaningful role in creating sustainable communities where we operated, our business would not be sustainable. And that simple notion that we believed and had attracted us to the UN Global Compact. And clearly for us in the Coca-Cola system, as well as all our bottling partners, the Global Compact provided us with consistent language, consistent principles, consistent protocols, as well as consistent measurement. And that was really important for us, bringing all the work together that we're doing all across the world in the area of sustainability in a consistent way, and with the credibility and responsibility and accountability that comes with the United Nations brand. This has been an incredibly important development for us. And really, in March 2006, we signed the Global Compact because of that, and because of the fact that we supported all the 10 universal principles in the areas of both human rights, labor, as well as environment and anti-corruption. And the Compact has provided us a clear strategic and operational framework for all our businesses across the world, and has really a unique brand power we've seen since we've signed it, to convene dialogue, as I said, between government, civil society and business to address all the global challenges. And Yeah, I'll give you an example of one case in point, the work we're doing around water through, in all the partnerships that we have through the Global Compact. And we have three key platforms on water, and that is to ensure that as a system we are focused on working to replace every single drop of water we use in our beverages and their production back. So returning every single drop that we use back. And that's through recycling, that's through reducing, and that's through replenishing. And we have clear goals leading us to that overall vision that I mentioned. Give you just a point of reference. The Coca-Cola Foundation, for example, provided monetary support to the Global Water Challenge. And the results of a collaboration, mostly in Africa as well as in other parts of the world, are already evident. Just in one country alone in Africa, we initiated sanitation, hygiene and drinking water in 45 schools in Kenya about a year ago, and that program now, through again a close relationship between both business, government, local government in Kenya, as well as our association with the Global Water Challenge, has led now to the effort being widened to 1,500 schools, and it's now a $10 million program. And we've got programs like this all across the world, and that's why we see it really key that it is a very important element in how we think about sustainability. And the Global Compact also, we're working to add our scale to the imperative to reduce carbon emissions. The world's certainly water challenges will only worsen, we believe, with climate change. So that's a key goal again. And also we support the Compact's Caring for Climate Leadership statement, of course, which commits to those commits all of us who signed the CEO support strategic and operational change and public communication around that. There's some talk today in today's world because indicating that this financial crisis will lead to a lessening of the commitments around sustainability. We at the Coca-Cola Company think it's absolutely the opposite, because this is we don't see any of this as any philanthropic activity. It is part of our business. It is clearly that the concept of doing well by doing good touches every part of our sustainability framework in the Coca-Cola Company, as it should, and it is now clearly embedded in all our strategic frameworks, whether it is water, whether it is climate change, or whether it is recycling. And again, in recycling we have clear goals to ensure that we can recycle every single PET package that we have that we use for our beverages over a period of time. And we have just inaugurated the world's largest recycling plant in Spartanburg, South Carolina, 2 weeks ago. And that is just a part of our activity around the world to ensure that we can get to that goal by 2020. And even by 2010, we're going to get to a goal of 25%. So we are excited. We believe that the framework of doing well by doing good certainly works. And we have certainly benefited greatly from our association with the UN Compact and a signatory to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Muhtar, and to all three panellists. Now, I want to move along, but before opening the floor to the audience here, I just want to very quickly, and in the light particularly of what the Secretary-General has said about the importance of confidence and trust in business and of values in today's difficult times, I just want to put some very quick questions with a request for a quick reply to each of the panellists. Kris, could I start with you? You referred to the pendulum moving in terms of enterprise behaviour. I'm interested in the proper balance, if you like, or mix between regulation of business and the voluntary obligations subscribed to by business in initiatives such as the Global Compact. do you believe at a time when regulation seems to be back on the agenda, and is being much talked about here, that we have the right mix today, that there needs to be a change, and does the Global Compact have to face up to any changes in that regard?
See, regulation is not going to be the complete answer. Regulation is national, business is global, business is international. Regulatory arbitrage is something which business will take advantage of. I think what is needed is creating a set of standards which everybody subscribes to, and then they put themselves up for measurement against those. And then you will have a system which will create that framework or that balance that is required. And of course, the regulators also can look at these standards. Accounting standards are adopted by national regulators and then implemented nationally. So I'm really talking about something of that nature. The standards, maybe the Global Compact framework itself becomes the standard. Of course, it has to be further detailed out in terms of best practices, in terms of levels of implementation. And then nationally it is adopted and then implemented within organization. So that's the step-by-step process I see happening.
Thank you. Cynthia, can I turn to you? You've spoken very persuasively about the manner in which adherence to the Global Compact has affected the behaviour of your company. And of course, this is a top-of-the-class panel. You're 3 CEOs deeply committed to the Global Compact and its principles. Do you think, looking more widely, that the Global Compact has brought about what we might refer to as a sea change in business attitudes much more widely, not just in your company, but in your competitors and in the business cultures in which you operate? Can the Global Compact claim that achievement? And if not, what does it need to do?
You asked for a quick answer.
Please.
I would say yes, absolutely. It's had a huge impact. And I just came away from the government meeting of our sector. And I think it was with the NGOs that we had this type of discussion. I think we are engaged. I think we understand that we go way beyond compliance to establish that trust. We need to have those partnerships to build a sustainable development framework and success, no matter where we are. And I think the UN Global Compact initiatives, the principles, have only given us the baseline to begin from.
Muhtar, can I ask you one question and we'll go to the audience? It's sort of axiomatic that businesses have to be in a process of continual change and movement. Does the same apply to the Global Compact? 10 years on, does the Global Compact have to stay the same, or would you like to see it develop in different and new ways, and what might they be?
I think evolution is inevitable, and I think that we'll for sure see some of that, and that will probably be positive, a certain amount of evolution. But I don't think you should break, redo something that's working. And there are many parts of the compact that are really working well. And the next phase is that we in business need to ensure that every part of our sustainability programs, we are able to connect properly from a business perspective, ecology, as well as economy, both coming from the same Greek word, means house in order. And I think if you can have that, if we can make sure that we live up to that expectation, and to live up to that expectation, this has got to be a business imperative. Recycling now is working for us because it makes business sense. It makes business sense for us to collect our packaging, apply innovation to it, grind it, and make new food-grade bottles with it. Same way, when we're able to work with our sugar suppliers around the world and the farmers, their farmers, to reduce water usage, which is a very water-reliant agricultural process. We reduce the water that is used by the farmers in sugarcane. That makes good business sense because it brings the cost down. And I think the UN Global Compact will have to evolve so that we can get supply chains working and ensure that all the supply chains end to end are able to progress the agenda and ensure that ecology as well as economy and commerce meet with like a good working gearbox.
Thanks a lot. Perhaps we can now go to the audience. There are microphones that can come amongst you. Could you put your hand up if you want to ask a question? There's already one right here. Say who you are, and perhaps if you're addressing a question to one of the panelists in particular, say that as well.
Yes, I'm Gary Cohen. The question is for Mr. Kent. I do a lot of work in the field of global health, and every year I go to many meetings, and at the meetings I hear, well, if we could only utilize Coca-Cola's distribution system to distribute pharmaceuticals. And to tell you the truth, I think it's an awful idea because you're not a pharmaceutical company and there's a different set of core competencies necessary there. However, there are core competencies that Coca-Cola possesses that are the best in the world. And I've traveled to the most remote places in the world and I find Coca-Cola there, just as you said. The question is, and excuse me if it's a little naive or a little bit direct, but what about utilization of your core competencies to make something very high nutrition that could help to battle malnutrition, particularly among children, high nutrient and also hydration needs of children that can leverage your distribution system, call it Coca-Cola Life, and have a means that you can utilize your core competencies to actually save lives throughout the world, which among other things would be a great source of inspiration for your workforce. I think it would be fantastic from a reputational basis, and perhaps might not have any downside other than the challenge of developing it and leveraging your distribution and bottling network for it. Okay. So what about that idea, rather than distributing pharmaceuticals?
Well, firstly, we do use some of our distribution system for ensuring that some of our programs in our Africa Foundation around protection against HIV as well as malaria work. And we do have the widest reach of distribution in Africa. By far with our trucks, and we utilize them. So it's we haven't started distributing pharmaceuticals, and we won't, but we do use our distribution system. And I'm just in the process at the moment of talking to another NGO and organization to see if we can also distribute some nets in Africa. And we do collaborate with Nets for Life also, the other organization in Africa. Now, regarding nutritious products, we have in the Coca-Cola system company 1,800 products, beverages, with nutrition, without nutrition, with vitamins, and with calories, without calories, the entire spectrum. And certainly in parts of the world today, Asia, Africa, we do have certain beverages that we are distributing with very low-cost beverages for the purposes that you've mentioned, and we're looking at expanding across the world.
Okay, thank you. The gentleman in the front row here.
Hello, my name is John Paul MacDonald from Bombardier in Montreal, Canada. I have a question. It's not an easy answer, I'm sure, but those of us who have or are in the process of developing a human rights policy in within the Global Compact, I wonder if you could comment on the challenge of having some sort of, well, if not an enforcement mechanism, how do you measure the success of the human rights aspect?
I'm probably not the right person because in our business it's not a challenge. Typically we recruit engineers. So it's not an issue. So that's why I'm passing it on. Hopefully not a challenge with engineers.
Cynthia, do you want to try it? No. It's an interesting question. It's one that interests me very much. I didn't introduce myself at the beginning of this session, quite unforgivably. I come from the international trade union movement, and we have engaged very extensively and positively with the Global Compact. And we understand this is not a compliance mechanism. It's not a code of conduct as such. And, of course, the Compact is a learning and improvement mechanism. We understand that. But in the wider context, and I think John Ruggie's work that's been referred to already, is extremely important in addressing the issue that's been raised. Having only 6 minutes left in the programme, I don't think we're going to get much further than that now, but maybe out of the room we can follow through. I'm going to take one more question. I'm a bit myopic. I'm only seeing the front of the room. I think it's you, or maybe if both of you are quick, we could do it.
I'm Kevin McKinley. I'm the Deputy Secretary General at ISO. And the Global Compact has actually an important partner with ISO. We have an important agreement on the development of the 26,000 standard on social responsibility. And in fact, it's a way of, if you will, putting more detail to the Global Compact. And I wonder what the views are about the opportunities for the future related to building on an ISO standard in this area.
Okay. Let's ask this gentleman also to put his question, and then we'll wrap up.
I didn't understand.
My name is Praveen Nair. I'm from New York University. I have just a quick question. Most of the discussion we've had so far has referred to large companies. As we well know, most economies are made up of small and medium enterprises. And I was wondering how we can bring them into the Global Compact as well.
Okay, there are two questions. I'm actually going to try, and I hope you won't lose the answers to your questions, offer every panellist a 1-minute wrap-up, and perhaps if you have any points you want to make in response to those questions, you can integrate them. Let's start at that end of the
I'll
panel.
just start with the last question, and I need a clarification on the one before last question, but on the last question about how we get small companies involved, and I think that's a really good question, and it's happening today indirectly because the Global Compact signatories like us are working in great detail with our supply chain, and some of the supply chain is with very small companies, small farmers, and it extends into the supply chain. Although they are not signatories per se to the Global Compact, they are being worked with, collaborated with in great detail by the larger companies that have international businesses that have signed. So indirectly, the Global Compact and its principles are benefiting all those small companies, and those small companies are becoming better companies as a result. So I think there is that link, and I think it's working well from a practical point of view. That's something that I think you need to take away with. On the last, the question before last, you mentioned ISO. Could you just repeat the last sentence of your question?
The ISO 26000 standard is a standard under development right now. That has cooperation with the UN Global Compact,
right,
with the International Labour Organization and others. And it's a voluntary approach trying to enshrine a lot of what the Global Compact has done, trying to maintain consistency with the Global Compact principles. It's also an opportunity, I would say, as well, to give some guidance. So I'm just wondering what the panelists feel about opportunities for the future once this standard comes out.
I'm anxious to move along because
I think I think there's validity in moving that standard along, and there will be benefits because it is voluntary. And I think the biggest benefits come from those voluntary actions where you stay ahead of regulatory forces for the benefit of all. So,
thanks, Muhtar. Cynthia, to wrap up.
Just a couple of observations or comments with respect to some of the questions. I do think we, again, in our industry in particular, we are in a very, very challenging period. There are a lot of junior miners who are not going to survive. Exploration in our industry has been cut by about 50%. We believe capital in projects for the longer term is at risk in a very big way. So when the demand comes back, there will be an extreme tightness of supply of commodities, of metals and minerals. And we expect at that point that prices will then ramp up at an even steeper level than what we've seen in the past. And the natural tendency or the natural reaction to what's going on is, as the Secretary General suggested, is we're only focusing on the here and now. We are cutting back. People are losing thousands and thousands of jobs are being lost. In places like South Africa, it's having a huge, huge impact because those people then will not find other places to find jobs. And we therefore need to be so focused on being that much better. We're working on becoming more efficient, more streamlined, and more than ever protecting those principles that we're talking about today. So whether it's HIV/AIDS, whether it's on the safety front, protecting our employees day in, day out, whether it's human rights, it's now more than ever that we have to reach out to governments, we have to reach out to NGOs, and we have to come together.
Thanks. Cynthia, 1 minute, Kris, I'm afraid.
Sure. See, it is a mindset issue, it's a leadership issue. It's an issue of walking the talk. What you say and what you do cannot be different. And in that sense, if we truly believe, and I believe that most people would agree, most leaders would agree that this is the right thing to do, and they are doing it. 6,000 organizations are doing it. They are allocating resources, allocating money to do this. Why don't we seize this opportunity to make that a permanent thing? And that is what I would say. And ISO, etc., are voluntary. But then, if let's say 70% of the companies in industry adopt it, the rest will be forced to adopt. So, what is a voluntary standard actually becomes a standard best practice, and that's what is required, I believe.
Thank you so much. We do have to stop now. Just two very rapid comments. Number one, what I hear from the panel is that Global Compact and the principles it espouses, this is not surplus to core business. This is core business. You're not about to give up on this if times are getting difficult, business conditions are getting hard. It's for good. That's excellent. Second point, which you can't help but bring out, is at the moment when the Secretary General has pointed to us the figures for the lack of confidence, falling confidence and trust in business, at the same time we hear these great stories about the commitment of business to do the right things. There is a contradiction there. There's something which isn't getting through, and I think that gap between those two discourse we need to reflect on more and see how we close it. Thank you all very much for your participation. A special thanks to the Secretary General for his presence and his leadership in this matters. Thank you so much.